boys and girls, it's Mrs. Cutter. Thanks for joining me today for our read aloud. We are going to be hearing one of my favorite stories, Hannah and Sugar. I think I say that all my books are my favorites, but this one definitely makes me think a lot about being brave. And we're going to talk about that at the end of our story today. So here's our story, Hannah and Sugar. It's written and illustrated by Kate Berube. And when we get to the end of the story, we're going to talk about, remember our target from last week with key details? We're going to talk about the plot, the characters, the setting, and we're also going to talk about the author's purpose. The author's purpose is when you try to learn a lesson from a story. What's the point of their story? Why did they write it? So we're going to think a lot about how Hannah changes during the story, and we'll reflect on that at the end of our read aloud. I also want to pull out a couple of vocabulary words. Vocabulary words are words that we don't always know what they mean, but once we hear them in the story, we can probably figure them out. So there's a couple of vocabulary words I want you to listen for in this story, and we're going to see if we can understand what they mean when we're done with this book. The first vocabulary word I want you to listen for is the word whimper. What does the word whimper mean? Press pause and tell somebody with you, what do you think the word whimper means? And then listen for it in the story and see if you're right. The second vocabulary word I want you to listen for in our story, Hannah and Sugar, is the word trembling. I wonder what the word trembling means. Press pause and think about it and tell somebody near you, what does the word trembling mean? And we're going to see if we can find that word in our story. Okay, you know your two vocabulary words you're going to try to listen for. Whimper and trembling. They're in the story somewhere. Keep an ear out. Let's get started on this book, Hannah and Sugar, written and illustrated by Kate Berube. Every day after school, Hannah's papa picked her up at the bus stop. And every day after school, Sugar was at the bus stop waiting for Violet P. Every day after school, Mrs. P asked Hannah if she wanted to pet Sugar. And every day after school, Hannah said, "No, thank you." Every day after school, Hannah's papa picked her up at the bus stop. And every day, Sugar was at the bus stop waiting for Violet P. Every day after school, Mrs. P asked Hannah if she wanted to pet Sugar. And every single day, Hannah said, "No, thank you." But one day, something was different. "Sugar is missing," said Violet P. "She's been gone all night and all day. No one can find her." Everyone promised to help look for Sugar. Everyone searched high and low and high, and here and there, and everywhere else too. But soon it was time to go home for dinner, and there was still no sign of Sugar. After dinner, Hannah watched the stars come out. She listened to the sound of the trains in the distance, and she wondered how it would feel to be lost in the dark. She decided that it would be scary, and that if she were lost, she would be sad and probably hungry. Then she heard a strange sound, a little whimper. It was coming from the side of the house. She heard it again. She tried to see what was making the sound, but it was too dark. She crawled in between two bushes and saw Sugar! Hannah gasped. She started to back out, but then she stopped. Hannah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Then she gently reached out her trembling hand. Sugar sniffed Hannah's hand and rubbed her face along it. Hannah's papa was very proud of her, and Violet P and Mr. and Mrs. P were so happy to see Sugar. After that, every day after school, Hannah's papa picked her up at the bus stop. And every day after school, Sugar was at the bus stop waiting for Violet P. And for Hannah too. The end. That's a great story. I love that one. It's definitely a happy ending. Now, we're going to talk about the book because really smart readers can always talk about their stories when they're done listening to them or reading them. So I'm going to give you some questions, and I want you to listen to the question, press pause, and then answer the questions. And then we'll talk a little bit more at the end. Question number 1. What was the setting of this story? Remember what the word setting means? Where did the story take place? Press pause and see if you can remember. Did you say the bus stop was the setting in the story? Yeah, that's what I said too. There are definitely some other locations in the story that they go, like maybe the bush where she finds sugar, but the setting of this story definitely mostly takes place at the bus stop. The next question is, who were the characters? Remember what characters mean? The stars of the story. Who were the stars or the characters of this book? Did you say Hannah and Sugar are the stars of this story? Well, you're right. There are also a couple other characters we could mention, like Hannah's papa and Violet P. and her parents. Remember during the reading, I asked you to keep an ear out for a couple of vocabulary words? Anybody remember what those words were? Did you find them in the story? So whimper was the first vocabulary word I asked you to keep an ear out for. Did you hear it in the story? Remember when Hannah was sitting on the front steps and she heard a whimper from the bushes? So after hearing the word whimper in the story, what do you think it means? Press pause and tell someone. Were you right? The other vocabulary word I wanted you to listen for in the story was the word trembling. Did you hear it in the story? Do you remember when Hannah reached out her trembling hand towards Sugar? Why was her hand trembling? And what does that mean? Press pause and tell someone. You guys are doing a great job answering questions about this story. Now I'm going to really stretch your brain and ask you a few more questions. And I want you to think really hard about your answers. In fact, when you press pause to answer, a good way to stretch your brain would be to maybe write down your answer or draw a picture. It's okay if you don't. If you just want to talk about it, that's all right as well. But if you're feeling like stretching your brain, maybe get a pencil and piece of paper and write down your answers to the next few questions I'm going to ask you. How did Hannah feel about dogs at the beginning of the story? Think about, how did Hannah act when Sugar was around? When she got off the bus and Mrs. P asked, "Would you like to pat Sugar?" What did Hannah always say? Did you say that Hannah was afraid of dogs at the beginning of the story? I agree. I can tell that she's afraid, even though the book didn't ever tell me she was afraid. I can tell by looking at her body language. That's what somebody's telling you without using their words. I see that her arms are crossed and she's leaning away from Sugar, and her eyes are looking at Sugar like she's nervous and scared about what Sugar will do next. I can definitely tell, even though they never told us in the story, that Hannah was feeling afraid of dogs at the beginning. The next question is, how did Hannah feel about dogs at the end of the story? Press pause, take some time, answer your question. If you answered that Hannah isn't scared of dogs anymore, then good job paying attention. I can definitely tell that her and Sugar have formed a nice friendship. I wonder how she acts though around other dogs that she doesn't know. Maybe Sugar helped her not be scared anymore, or maybe she's still nervous. But I do know at the end of the story, she definitely likes Sugar. Another question to really stretch your brain is, what did the author, Kate Berube, want to teach about in this story? Remember we said author's purpose? What was the purpose of her writing this? She wanted us to know something at the end of this story. What do you think that was? Press pause and answer your question. So what do you guys think? What do you think was Kate Berube's purpose in writing this story? What do you think she wanted to teach us? When you were talking about that and answering that question, did you say the word brave? Being brave? Being brave means you do something even though you're scared to do it. Like when Hannah was scared of dogs, but she still helped Sugar. She still found her in the bush. Remember, she reached out that trembling hand. In fact, I'm pretty sure that her purpose of writing the story was to encourage us to be brave. If you look in the inside page here, on the title page, right here, she wrote, "Be brave." The author wrote that. So I definitely think she wants us to feel strong and tough and brave after we read this story, just like Hannah. All right, guys, 2 questions left. This is an important one. What was your favorite part of the story? And why did you like that part? Write about it, draw about it, or talk about it. And for our final question, what connection did you make? A connection is what the book reminds you of or what it makes you think of. Have you ever lost anything? Have you ever been scared of something and you acted brave even though you were scared? Think about something this book reminded you of. Talk about it, draw a picture, maybe even write about it. Great job today with our book, Hannah and Sugar. You guys really stretched your brains and answered a lot of great questions about this story. We're good readers when we can talk about our books. And even though we're not together at school to read stories together and talk about books, that's something you can teach your family about at home. Read a story. Ask your family some questions about it. See if they can answer just as well as you did. All right, like always, we should probably end this read aloud with a song. Lucky for you, there's an Emily Arrow song that goes with this story. Have a great day. Enjoy. Bye, guys. I miss you.
Hannah and Sugar, do-do-do-do-do. Hannah and Sugar, do-do-do-do-do. Hannah and Sugar, do-do-do-do-do. Every day, waiting at the bus stop. Every day is Sugar the dog. And every day, Hannah's afraid of Sugar. But then one day, little Sugar disappeared. Then one day, looking for her everywhere. Then one day, Hannah helped search for Sugar. They looked high and low, here and there, everywhere, but there's no sign of Sugar. Hannah and Sugar, do-do-do-do-do. Hannah and Sugar, do-do-do-do-do. Hannah and Sugar, do-do-do-do-do. Then Hannah heard something in her front yard. Hannah heard something in her front yard. Hannah heard something that might be Sugar. She looked high and low, here and there, everywhere, but there's no sign of Sugar. But can you guess who's hiding in the bushes? Can you guess what happens next? Can you guess that Hannah's afraid to see Sugar? But I'm so glad that Hannah reached out to Sugar, and now they are friends for forever. High and low, here and there, everywhere, till Hannah found Sugar. And that's the story of Hannah and Sugar. Hannah and Sugar, do-do-do-do-do. Hannah and Sugar, do-do-do-do-do. Hannah and Sugar, do-do-do-do-do.